Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramon, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host today, Steve Ramona, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today. We dedicated this podcast to exploring the idea of doing business and living your life with a servant's heart. And when you do that, you're going to make an impact in your world. And I think the more important thing is make a difference. How big that difference is, we can't figure that out. You have to do that yourself. But taking the action of a servant's heart is huge. And we want to motivate you, inspire you, and educate you to make an impact in your world as well. So my guest is, again, today's guest, guys and girls, you don't take a pad of paper out and take some notes. I just spent 8 minutes with them. I've already got notes here that's going to change my life. I know it's going to change your life as well. And while you're listening to the show today, here's the most important thing. Here's your call to action. I want you to think how you're going to serve yourself and others today and what impact you create today. The key word there is today, because I hear back from people all the time that said, I listened to a great show. In the beginning, you said about serving. I got done with the show and I forgot about it. I didn't do it for a month. I didn't do it for a few weeks. Well, get started then, but don't wait to do this. This is an action you can take that anybody can do, cost you no money, maybe a little bit of time, but will impact you and make a difference. And today's episode, I'm proudly excited to have Pantheon Alliance as my sponsor. Imagine being part of exclusive community of high income, successful business owners and entrepreneurs from very diverse industries. Together, they're building a thought leader platform to impact and change the world. Want more information on Pantheon Alliance, just reach out to me and I'll get you all the information you need. With that being said, we have a military guy here, and I've said on many shows, if I started a business tomorrow, 50% of my staff would be military, because there's so many things, and we may dive into that today, that I could say, one, they need jobs, first of all, the short's big. Yeah. But there's so much they've learned in the military, and I kind of wish I did, for what I can learn to be a leader in multiple things. But today, I really am excited to welcome to our show, Dr. James. Welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
So we were talking about your book, Leadership is Not Enough. Just that title is eye-catching. And an audience, it should, if you're anything in leadership, it catch your eye. What was the mission of the book?
Well, the mission of the book really comes down to my dissertation when I was, so my doctorate's in organizational leadership. I was leading a sales department at the time. And I pursued, I studied leadership's influence on employee satisfaction, employee job satisfaction, and productivity. And what I found was that leadership was not statistically relevant to the performance of the team. And at the time, I had to step back and think, what do you mean it's not statistically relevant? It can't be. I'm a good leader. It's all about the leader, right? Like the hubris of being that guy and that person. And it really made me sit back and go, okay, well, if it's not, then what is? And so I had to dig into not only my own data, but a lot of data that already exists. And it pointed to it's the environment that the people work within that drives the ultimate performance over the long term. And so that was what I wanted to do with the book, is just give back to the world. And, you know, if I make my daily bread along the way, amen. But what I'm really just trying to do is just give in the only way I know how.
Yeah, that's powerful. You mentioned too before the show in the green room that you're giving out all your intellectual property on this topic in the book. Why are you doing that?
To give, you know, I want to it's not possible for me to be in every organization, right?
Yeah.
Yet the message that I'm trying to give is so powerful that I want to make, I mean, if I can make one organization more successful because their people are thriving and it costs that company only the $25 or whatever they paid for the book, it was a true gift to every single one of those employees. That's all I'm trying to do. I really believe that we share a mutual energy on this planet, and I want to be a positive force in that energy.
I totally agree that, yeah, and you tap into that energy, as we both know, it's so powerful. The
Yeah,
flow
yeah,
state is unbelievable.
amen.
But as we talked about too, and I've heard people say, well, Dr. James, you're giving out everything. How are you going to make any money? I mean, you're giving everything away. Nobody's going to come to you.
Yeah, the point there is that's a short-term thinking. Number one, most organizations don't have the people, A, with the bandwidth, and B, with the skill set to really implement this all on their own, right? It take them a time, right? Like I wrote this so that I could take all of this knowledge out of my head and get it down on paper and be able to deliver it. And so, if somebody takes the book and they implement it and now their employees are thriving, great, fantastic. That is good. And that produces, again, good energy, and that good energy flows in a circle and it will come back. And so
Yeah.
I'm looking at the long term.
Yeah. And a disclaimer here, audience, just so you know, and I talked with the Dr. James before the show. He's not saying you shouldn't have leadership.
No.
It's just not the only thing. Talk about that, because I think it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Leadership matters. It's
Yeah.
just not the only thing that matters. We've seen this amazing disparity in this country. If we go back, so we got to go back to about 67 to 76, 78, that time frame when this concept really shifted, where the employee went from an asset to a liability on the balance sheet. And that's one of the fundamental questions I ask any organization I'm talking to. Where do you put your employees? Is this a liability or are they an asset? Because liabilities we diminish, right? Our objective is to always minimize our liabilities and maximize our assets. And if we go back to Adam Smith's, the founder of capitalism, we go back to The Wealth of Nations, that book is not about a free market society. Yes, that exists, but that is an outcome of the inputs, and the inputs are voluntary labor, right? Labor coming together, working together with the owner of the business to produce an outcome where everybody succeeds. And then the Jack Welch, and I'm not a fan, the Jack Welch school of thought that employees are liabilities, and you got to cut your labor force every year, and you need to create this hyper competitive environment, and you need to ship your labor overseas. We have seen now, 30 years later, 40 years later, the detriment not only to our country as a whole, but also to corporations. I truly believe that this putting the leader on the pedestal and not the workforce is an actual deep threat to democracy, or not democracy, that's a different topic, but to capitalism.
Yeah.
Capitalism as a whole can't function when all the focus is on the leader and not the people actually getting the work done.
God, Dr. James, you're blowing my mind right now. That's so powerful and simple, but when you get our head involved, it becomes very difficult. And I gotta say, we're so aligned, because I talk to people all the time. You're in the people asset investment business. Treat them like an investment, but they're an asset. And I'm going to borrow that. And audience, you should borrow it too. Stay away from the liability. If they're a liability, work on making them an asset. And that's what you're saying, really, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's powerful.
And that's where good leadership really matters, right? Like,
Yeah.
the point here is, and the point of my book, I'm a systems thinker. I'm an ops person at heart, a salesperson by training, and a doctor through education. And if you create the right systems, you still need a leader to work with your people. And if you have a great leader, you're going to thrive even more. But the beauty of a strong system is that if you have a terrible leader, their negative influence is diminished because the system is strong enough to see past them. People often give so much credibility to military leaders, and amen, they are great leaders, have come out of the military, but the American military is not powerful because of its leaders. The American military has a system that creates powerful leaders, and that's the difference, right? It's the system that creates the performance, not the leader. And the reason why is because leadership rotates every 2 years, and if they relied upon the leaders to be successful, they couldn't be. Right. Same thing with companies. Your average CEO is a 5-year life cycle. right? And it goes down from there. So if it was all about the leader, and here's the thing, I call it the great training robbery. Organizations spend a lot of money on leadership development, where they would be better spending that money on creating environments where their employees thrive. Why? Because every year, 20% of that workforce is gone. 20% of your leadership force is gone, right? And so now you got a hole that can't really be filled, right? And so it's that concept that let's focus first on our systems, and then our leadership's job is just to keep that system working.
It's interesting. So the military system, the byproduct is leadership. Fantastic leaders because of their system. That's why I mentioned at the beginning, I'd hire a veteran like you all day because of discipline, and we don't have to get into all that. That's so, and again, I'm listening to you, and it's not hard,
no,
but it's hard to implement. And that's where you come in to help them implement that, right?
Yeah.
You've had an interesting background. You're a very chaotic and abusive environment.
Yeah.
How'd you get to where you are today, getting past that obstacle?
So, I can't ask God to forgive me if I can't forgive another, right? So that's A. B, holding on to pain. Listen, people say that pain, like people who've never experienced hard pain or whatever, they hold on to it and they can't ever let it go. And I don't believe pain ever leaves us. I believe we just get stronger at carrying it. So I had to forgive others. I don't like to call myself a survivor of the abuse I went through, because just like I broke my ankle, I'm not a broken ankle survivor. I just can't run as well with that ankle, right? I suffered some very traumatic abuse. And I had to realize very, very early on that it wasn't my fault. That first I had to forgive myself, which was silly because there wasn't any reason to forgive myself. I didn't do anything wrong. And then that allowed me to then forgive the other people as just weak and suffering from their own problems and unable to be strong enough to move beyond it. And then I vowed to be strong enough to never carry that forward to anybody else.
So what I'm hearing is you're amazing, Dr. James. This is because I haven't dealt with that to that level. But what you're saying is turn that negative tragedy, catastrophic event into a positive. Might take a year, might take 10 years, but you're stepping every day into the future of making it more of a positive.
Absolutely. And you're actually the first podcast I've actually ever publicly told that to at any degree, because I've just come to the place that it's real. It's who I am. And if I can help anybody, if I can help one other person move beyond their pain, then,
Amen.
I scored, right? Yeah. Amen. I say to you. Yeah. So just trying to do good.
I thank you so much for being transparent. And I know somebody listening is going to be affected by that one way or the other, which is the whole idea. I believe in podcast is let's make an effect on 1 or 1,000. It doesn't matter.
Right.
You talked about people. Well, tied to people or employees in your business is culture. What's one thing somebody listening to says, all right, Dr. James, I love it. What's my first step to changing this culture?
See, the challenge there is my model is such where the reason my model for an employee performance culture doesn't use words pillars, because there's 4 elements to my model. I don't use 4 pillars because pillars are strong, they're independent, and they don't touch. I use the word elements because elements come together to make something stronger, better. That's the objective, right? So it can't be one thing. It has to be a very holistic view of how are you training your employees? How are you recognizing performance? How are you holding them accountable? And accountability is critical. And then finally, what is your internal communication strategy? And I'll say, if there's one thing, if it's one and all you can do is one, it's focus on your internal communication strategy. Most organizations spend a lot of money thinking about their external communication strategy. And then what happens is they talk to their employees like they're talking to the public world. And nobody wants to hear brand speak. And employees can see right through that. And the 2 fastest ways to motivate or demotivate your employee is A, mess with their pay. That'll demotivate them. B, talk to them like they're, not employees and they're, brand speak. And then to motivate them, obviously, I don't believe pay as a motivator. I only consider it a demotivator. But communication is so strong because if you do it right, that is how you can motivate your workforce.
We could talk for hours about this, but you hear the old phrase, I'm 63, and I remember hearing that phrase, you earn your keep, that phrase about it's all about the money. And it is in the bottom line, but talk about, because I love this and other people have talked about it, I know you do too. When you're a great leader with a great culture and you go to your employees and go, right now we're struggling. We've got to do a freeze, but what we're going to do is something else, or we're going to put in writing that we're going to work on something like that. That's important, isn't it? That's that internal communication you're talking about.
Absolutely. Steve, probably the best example that I can think of for this
Okay.
is Nokia. And I don't know if you heard the story of the so Nokia released a few bad products. Or not Nokia, Nintendo. Sorry. Do love the Nokia phone.
Yeah.
Nintendo released a couple bad products in a row, and they were financially struggling hard. And so instead of cutting the workforce, the CEO cut his pay 50%, and his leadership took a pay cut as well. And when asked about this, he said, listen, I could have easily cut the workforce, and our bottom line would have looked great, and we would have finished strong, and everybody would have been happy financially on Wall Street. But the problem is, how can my employees create their best products if they don't know they're next in line to be fired? And that's the point, right? Is that relationship, that energy that flows, right? And so the leader just needs to be completely transparent. And one of my leadership tips is, every leader, whether you have the answer or not, one of the best things to say is, I don't know, what do you think? And get them talking, get them engaged in solution solving, right? And just show them I care and I'm listening. So an internal communication strategy requires humility and absolute transparency.
Humility is the game changer. And you know this in the military. I'm going to say this again, audience. I had a gentleman who was in the military. He talks about 5-star generals going to his staff. I made a mistake. I'm like, they're that humble. He goes, it's across the board. And audience, think about this. What Dr. James is saying, in the military, it's life or death. They could make a bad decision. People could die. We're just talking about Nintendo, a couple products, right? Nobody's dying. I like to make that point. Also, too, Dr. James, this leader, this president, whoever he wasn't homeless or broke or searching for his next meal either when he cut his pay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
The pay disparity between, when I talk about the 60s, 70s and the offshoring of labor and looking at employees at assets, at that exact same time, we can look at the disparity between CEO pay. And there's 3 ways to look at it. You can look at it compared to your lowest paid employee. You can look at it at the median, or you can look at it at the average. I don't care which of those 3 you look at. Basically, the concept is the discrepancy between CEO pay and lowest paid employee or median pay or average pay. It just, the delta shot through the roof. And to that point, there was a CEO who was in a town hall, and people were asking her about their bonuses, and she was trying to say something like, rise up, these are hard times, but she said, get out of pity town. And we're talking about people worried about paying for vacations, paying for their food bill, right? Paying for college. That CEO isn't worried about whether or not she's going to be able to afford a vacation.
I cannot believe that. Is amazing. It happens. I get more than we know. It's wow. Well, there you go. Let's go back. We're kind of going full circle. Don't treat them like 4 or 5-year-olds, which is what she did. Right. That's what you tell an elementary school kid. Pity party, quit crying. Let's go back to, to our, whatever we're doing. That's so powerful. We're coming to the end here, but a question came to my head. I really love to hear the answer. So on the other side of culture is an employee that's bad for the culture. Maybe that's the wrong word, or is negative for the culture. It's probably better. How does a leader and how does a company handle that correctly to keep the culture going positive?
Make decisions quickly. My wife was a manager in an area, and there was a star performer on the team, absolute star, and the executive team would not let her fire this person. Ended up, long story short, just completely tore the entire team apart. And the thing is, I believe the most important conversation that happens in an organization is the one-on-one between the manager and their employee, and that needs to be happening regularly. It needs to be well documented. It needs to be well structured. And if you are and you need to hold people accountable. And if a person is not performing, whether it be qualitatively or quantitatively, then you need to make the steps to address it. And if it's not working, then you need to be willing to let the employee go, because the old, a bad apple can kill a tree. There's nothing more true than that. Nobody wants to perform when somebody else isn't performing and they're just tearing the culture down. And that, they may be mathematically looking great in the numbers, but they're tearing everybody else down. And so the long-term health of the organization will suffer.
It's like a sports team. You have one bad apple. We know a number of sports teams have failed because of that. I'm a big sports guy. I think you are too. And I got to tell you, Dr. James, I've asked that question to 100 of my guests. It's the best answer. I mean, they were all good answers, but I didn't think about that. And audience, if you're a leader and you're an owner or an entrepreneur and have a team, quickly is the key, because that bad apple, that bad apple in the bushel could start affecting other apples. And next thing you know, you're so far behind, you're going to have to hire you 10 times just to recover from the culture.
Yeah.
Well, it's just one last question. So your book, again, Leadership is Not Enough. Audience, go out and get it. I'm got already bookmarked. He doesn't know that, but I already got it bookmarked. What are some of the topics people are going to learn? One or two, maybe it's the elements that you said that they're going to learn from the book.
I'd say one of the most important things is I spend a lot of time covering the one-on-one conversation between the manager and the employee and how important that is. And if there's one thing that can be learned, it's that one. Because again, it goes back to communication. They're going to learn in the back of the book, there's do's and don'ts, right? Like so it's called Leadership is Not Enough, an operator's guide to a performance culture. And it really is an operator's manual. You can pick it up, you can treat it like a manual, and you can implement and move forward successfully.
Yeah, that's powerful. Well, there you go. He just sold it. He sold me. At least he's got one book sold. And that's for sure, because personal development is so important. We won't get into that. I would love to have you come back, because I've got some other questions I want to ask, because this is a topic, especially after COVID is left and it's still lingering a little bit, is so important now. It was important before, but all these different things have come up. Business has gone bankrupt because they didn't pivot and all that. Culture is so much more important now, and will be for the next 10 years, I believe, than ever. And you fix that, you're on your way to being a successful company. Let's end with a very fun question.
Okay.
So you've got a reservation at a restaurant, a table for 4. You've got 3 guests coming, dead or alive. Who would you invite, and what food would you order?
Oh, Lord. Well, the food would be hard, because my list would include
list it out.
It would include Gandhi. It'd include
oh wow.
It'd include and this is an interesting one, President Kennedy, and it would include Sun Tzu.
Wow.
And I'm pretty sure that Gandhi's vegetarian, so I'd have to have an entire plethora of different food, because he would have been a vegetarian, and I'm sure Sun Tzu would not have been. And we know President Kennedy likes steak, so there'd have to be an entire array of food. Yeah, a whole buffet of options.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Dr. James, I want to thank you so much for blessing my audience and being motivational, inspirational, and educational. People listening, I'm sure somebody's going to go, how do I get a hold of Dr. James so I can support you or connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. James Chitwood. You can also go to Leadership is Not Enough, and that'll take you to being able to purchase the book, as well as, there's a submission form to contact me. You could also go to performanceculture.expert. That is the name of my company, as well as its URL. Keep it simple, performanceculture.expert, and reach out there, and I'd be absolutely happy to help you. I really believe in paying it forward. So you want to have a free conversation? Absolutely. First one's always free. Happy to help, and we can see where it goes. I believe in giving value in every conversation.
Audience, that's the definition of a servant's heart right there. If you took that 30 seconds and implemented that in your life, game changer. Again, thank you, Dr. James. And always, I say at the end, comment on the YouTube channel when this comes out. If it's comments for Dr. James, I'll make sure he gets them. But also critique this podcast. Me and Dr. James, this is for you guys. For me, selfishly, I get to meet Dr. James and learn more about him. But really, ultimately, the podcast is meant to motivate, educate you, inspire you. And I'm sure we've done it. I'm sure he's done that, not me. That's what it's about. So give us some critique that can help, and subscribe. You could go back to Dr. James. He gave you tips of just elements to pillars. None of them are wrong, but if your stuff's coming together, elements is the perfect key. If you're doing separate things, pillars, I'm saying that because I want to mention on the show, it's so powerful. He's not saying don't do pillars. It's what your system is put together if it's elements. So, that kind of stuff you'll learn. But the other thing too is you're going through your day serving people, you might hear somebody say, my culture's not good. I need the help. I've got too many firings, whatever it may be. Hey, grab this podcast and share it with them. It's 20 minutes. You can learn about Dr. James, get his book, and so many things can happen. A lot of people don't talk about podcasting like that. And I love talking about it because it's such a great way to promote and highlight people that can bring value, because we're doing that every day. So with that being said, I'll get off my high horse because Dr. James got me fired up here. Me and Dr. James want to thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Have a great day, everyone.